Welcome to today's presentation, Leave the Leaves. Our speaker is Claudia Gerwin, who has recently become co-chair of the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia Public Education Committee. Claudia trained as a Master Gardener in 2007, and she has also received certification as a tree steward. She considers herself a gardener naturalist and spends her spare time outside in nature, in the leaves during the fall, where she takes lovely photos that she will be sharing in her presentation. And now I'll turn things over to you, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Elaine. Good morning, everyone. With fall just around the corner, it's the ideal time for me to share information on the benefits of leaves and how to use fallen leaves in your landscape, your garden, and in compost. Briefly, I'm going to talk to you about the many benefits of leaves and how to get the most out of your leaves. I'll share some tips along the way, as well as other ways you can make the most of your leaves, to include composting. Let's jump right in and discuss the ecological role leaves have in providing habitat for insects and wildlife. Wildlife ranging from turtles and toads to songbirds, mammals, and invertebrates rely on leaf litter for food. Most of our backyard birds include insects and other invertebrates in their diet, and those invertebrates are the only food source for their babies in the spring. Some birds even nest in the leaf layer, for example, ovenbirds and northern bobwhites. Even rabbits will take cover in the leaves. Box turtles dig themselves into the top layer of soil beneath the leaf layer where they'll spend the winter. And the moisture retained by leaves serves as a home for toads, and they often burrow in dirt in areas with deep leaf litter or rotting logs, as these provide additional insulation. Wildlife, including toads and box turtles, will eat mushrooms, and many mushrooms thrive in moist, decomposing leaf litter or rotting logs. Insects use leaf litter as a protective cover during winter months. Many moths and butterflies overwinter in the fallen leaf litter. The microhabitat within the leaf litter maintains optimal humidity and temperature levels necessary for the process of metamorphosis. The structural complexity of leaf layers protects the cocoons, and some species, such as the Luna moth, which is the silk moth pictured here, incorporate fallen leaves into their actual cocoon when they pupate. Pictured here is a silk moth cocoon I found in our woods, and the caterpillar of a Cecropia moth, one of the largest silk moths. Silk moths spend the winter in their cocoons. Based on the shape and the fact that I found this cocoon in the leaf litter, and because I found Polyphemus moths on our property, I suspect that a Polyphemus moth emerged from this cocoon. Others, such as the eastern tiger swallowtail butterfly pictured on the left, form chrysalis that resemble dead leaves for camouflage in the winter leaf layer. A fritillary butterfly is pictured on the right frame of this slide, and they overwinter as caterpillars in leaves. Dead leaves are a food source for some butterflies. For example, the red-banded hair-streaked butterfly caterpillars, also found in our area, feed on dead leaves. Leaves also insulate the ground so insects that burrow in soil can hibernate. For example, bumblebee queens make burrows under fallen leaves to survive the winter and start a new colony. Other insects, such as firefly larvae, spend their winter underground, under leaves as well. So we're going to spend some time on this slide. First, Let's talk about the reasons why you should leave the leaves. Let's start by looking at the top two sketches of this four-paneled figure where I'll introduce the concept of keystone plants. The concept of keystone plants was popularized by Doug Tallamy, an entomologist whose research shows that native plants support the majority of insect species. Keystone plants are native species that provide resources such as habitat and food to a notable number of other species, including caterpillars, and those are the caterpillars of butterflies and moths. The drawing in the top left depicts an oak, considered a top keystone species because of the 940 species of caterpillars who feed on oaks. After feeding on the foliage of native trees, many butterfly and moth caterpillars spend the next life cycle, called the pupa, in the leaf litter or soil below the tree. They drop down from the tree onto what? If they drop onto leaves, then they have the ideal environment to thrive. On the other hand, if they drop onto regularly mowed turf, it's likely the end for them. The turf doesn't provide enough protection for those insects overwintering above ground, and the soil underneath is likely highly compacted for those heading underground. On this same slide, I'd like you to focus on the bottom two sketches of this diagram, where I'll introduce the concept of soft landings. Soft landings are undisturbed native plantings that provide the habitat for butterflies, moths, and many other beneficial insects to complete their life cycle. They're a place where you can leave leaf litter, which will provide insulating material for overwintering species. Leaves also give refuge to beneficial insects such as beetles and lacewings, and protection for insects that overwinter underground, such as fireflies and bees, as I previously mentioned. I'd like to credit this beautiful figure and the term soft landings to Dr. Heather Holm, a pollinator conservationist and author, and Leslie Pilgrim, the founder of a nonprofit in Minneapolis that supports community environmental education and stewardship. After studying their surroundings, they both realized that native herbaceous plantings underneath native trees would expand the support they provide to overwintering insects. And Elsa Cousins is to be credited as the artist of this figure. So the next two slides, I'll highlight a couple of photos of soft landings. The photo on the left demonstrates how ferns emerge effortlessly from leaf litter. And on the right, a mix of native ferns and itea form a beautiful soft landing. And underneath these ferns and the itea are a mix of some pine needles as well as leaves. These photos were taken in my friend Jane Logan's yard, where she has native and other plantings under her native trees. Picture here, you can see bluebells and squill. Let's talk about how leaves can help improve the quality of your soil. In autumn, you can rake leaves onto the soft landings or drip line of the tree. You can use small twigs or plant debris to weigh down the leaves. There's no need to add any soil or compost on the root system of the tree. Why? Tree roots are the lungs of the tree, and they need to be able to breathe. I'd like to provide a couple of guidelines regarding the depth of leaves to leave under your tree. When deciding how deep to allow leaf litter to build up, observe your yard and take into account both the types of leaves and how quickly they decay. In all cases, be sure to leave a few inches of open space around the trunks of trees to prevent moisture buildup and other issues. This way, you can protect your plants and soil while letting the leaves do their work as natural mulch. A good rule of thumb when mulching your leaves is to spread them about 3 to 4 inches deep, enough to insulate the soil without smothering plants. If you're covering plants that have sturdy stems through winter, for example, a coneflower or perhaps perennial bushes of some kind, even Joe Pye weed, the depth isn't critical since the stems will mark their place. For plants that keep some greenery close to the ground over winter, you can either spread a little bit thinner layer of leaves there, and you can brush the leaves back from the rosettes in spring to keep them healthy. Where there aren't any plants under a tree, you can comfortably use the deeper end of that range. In all cases, use your judgment on how deep your leaf layer will be. Leaf type matters in how deeply you leave your leaves as well. Small leaves, such as those from a willow oak, can pack tightly and form a dense mat even at a couple of inches deep. So you can keep that leaf layer a little bit thinner. By contrast, larger leaves, like those from a white oak, are bulkier when first spread, and while you might start with a 4-inch layer, they'll settle and flatten significantly over the winter. This natural compaction is why adjusting depth based on leaf size and structure helps avoid smothering plants while still protecting soil and roots. Finally, leaf texture and thickness affect how quickly leaves break down. The thick, glossy, almost leathery like leaves of a southern magnolia, Magnolia grandiflora, are slow to decay and can take up to a year. They're higher in lignin, which is a polymer found in plant cell walls. Oak leaves break down faster than magnolia leaves, but the rate really does vary on the species. As a final example, maple leaves are a little bit thinner, so they decompose relatively quickly and often by spring. Another benefit of fallen leaves is the production of duff over time. Leaf mold is referred to as duff, and duff is a great way to increase the organic matter and mineral content of your garden while adding beneficial microorganisms and fungi. Duff also helps retain water in your soil, and birds love to root around in duff to eat worms and beetles. Leaves aid in carbon sequestration. Leaves are considered nature's nutrient recycler. The decomposition of leaves provides nutrients for the soil and sequesters carbon. Plants, such as trees, absorb carbon dioxide from the air as they grow and bind into biomass. This carbon sequestration plays a crucial role in limiting climate change by reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Leaves are a valuable resource in the landscape. There are many ways you can use them rather than sending them to the landfill as waste. They're a great source of organic matter and can be used as mulch in the garden or as a soil amendment. As mulch, leaves reduce evaporation from the soil surface, inhibit weeds, moderate soil temperatures, and prevent soil compaction. As leaves decompose, they release valuable nutrients for your plants. You can work leaves directly into your garden and flower bed soils in the fall. Personally, in our garden, we use a heavy layer of leaves between the rows to suppress weeds, and it works. Just think about the number of reduced bags of leaves entering landfills and the reduction in manpower and cost of handling these annually if you use your leaves in the landscape. So we're going to pause here to see if there are any questions that have been entered into the chat before we move along.
Hi, Claudia. There has actually just been one question. It was requesting a confirmation that you're recommending to mulch fallen leaves in a layer about 3 to 4 inches deep under the tree.
Yes, so that is a guideline. If you think about a woods, okay, and the layer of leaves underneath trees, typically that's about 6 inches. So I can comfortably provide the guideline to do at least 3 to 4 inches. But again, it's based on the type of leaf that you have and how quickly it will decompose. I mean, if you do 4 inches of oak leaves, by the springtime, they're going to be nicely compacted. They're going to be doing their thing and putting the nutrients into the soil. So again, study the type of leaves that you have in your landscape and consider the decomposition rate. So now we're going to move on to discussing leaf composting. Composting your leaves is fairly easy and doesn't require any expensive bins or tumblers, just a good mix of leaves and other additives and your time. Your compost pile can be enclosed, loose, or fenced in with some chicken wire or hardware cloth. So let's delve into discussing leaf composting. Why compost? Composted leaves create food for microbes in the soil, resulting in improved soil structure and tilth. By tilth, I mean that there will be more spaces in the soil, resulting in more oxygen in the soil. Using leaf compost may reduce the need for fertilizer over time, help better maintain moisture, and reduce soil erosion. The bottom line is that composting leaves improves the physical, chemical, and biological properties of the soil. And the best thing is it's free. In the end, you save money on soil amendments and you keep leaves out of the landfills. So how does composting work? First off, I'd like to credit Dr. David Dumani, a horticulturalist in the UK, with the picture depicted on this slide. To speed up the natural decomposition of organic matter, you can regulate the moisture, the temperature, the air, and the mix of ingredients that you use. The heat generated in a compost pile is a result of microbial activity. As microorganisms like bacteria and fungi break down organic matter, they release energy in the form of heat. This process, known as thermogenesis, is crucial for accelerating decomposition, eliminating pathogens, and producing high-quality compost. The ideal core temperature of a compost pile is about 130. Hot composting with core temperatures above 130, so actually hot composting, the core is about 130 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. The hot composting actually offers benefits such as more rapid decomposition, better pathogen control, and enhanced humus formation. And humus is the nutrient-rich component of healthy soil. So where should you place your compost pile, wire corral, or bin? First off, select an area that is easy to access, preferably in the shade, as you'll be accessing it to turn it frequently. Choose a level area with good drainage. Avoid placing it under a tree. Compost near the tree's base can bury the root flare and may allow parasitic fungi to thrive. Consider positioning the compost bin ideally towards the drip line. Remember, heat is generated by the pile, and you don't want the roots covered up with the heat that's being produced. You want to choose an area away from permanent wood structures. The reason you'll want to do this is because the constant moisture and organic material will promote wood decay, leading to structural rot and potentially attracting pests. You'll also want to place it near a water supply. Adequate moisture is essential for microbial activity. If it's too dry, decomposition slows. If it's too wet, then anaerobic conditions develop, reducing heat generation. If your pile gets too wet, it's going to emit an ammonia odor. You can mix in more dry browns, such as leaves or straw, to get rid of that. And I suggest your pile be almost like a well-wrung sponge in dampness. Finally, you can certainly build your pile on top of a planting site, such as where your vegetable garden is going to be planted. So next we're going to talk about how to make leaf compost. You're going to want to layer a mix of brown materials and green materials to make compost. Browns are carbon-rich materials. They include leaves, straw, wood chips, and sawdust. Just make sure that if you are using wood chips or sawdust, that it's from untreated wood. Greens are nitrogen-rich materials. Examples of those include fresh grass clippings, vegetable scraps, fresh hay, and plant waste. And a good mix of brown to green is 3-to-1. So you can start with the 6-inch layer of leaves and then add about a 2-inch layer of something green that contains more nitrogen. Again, you can use things such as grass clippings, vegetable waste from the kitchen, which could include things like peelings or even eggshells, coffee grinds, tea bags, manure, and if you have access to it, even discards such as hops from breweries. Those are all considered green. You can also spread a little native soil between the layers, which are going to add some bacteria and fungi and other organisms that will help decompose your organic waste. The higher carbon content provides energy for microorganisms, while nitrogen is crucial for their growth. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to make compost. I'd like to credit Bob Johnson, the husband of a fellow master gardener, with this picture of compost bins. This picture right here is of a 3-bin compost system, which creates a steady supply of finished compost by breaking it down in stages across 3 connected bins. You can add fresh organic material to bin number 1. Once bin number 1 is full, you'll rotate and aerate the pile into bin number 2. Finally, move the maturing material from bin number 2 to bin number 3 for final curing and use. This continuous cycle allows for a constant production of high-quality compost by keeping each stage separate and active. The size of your compost pile matters when it comes to how quickly it will reach optimal temperature, which again accelerates decomposition. A compost pile of about 3 foot by 3 foot in size will reach optimal temperature, thereby composting faster than, say, a larger pile. In designing your compost pile, make sure you can access it from one side to turn your pile every so often. Why do I recommend turning your pile? Aeration allows oxygen to reach microorganisms, supporting aerobic decomposition and heat production. How often should you turn your pile? That depends. Several factors actually influence the optimal turning frequency for your pile or bin. An enclosed compost bin, as pictured, or even a rotating tumbler, may require more frequent turning, like every 3 to 5 days, due to their higher temperature and faster decomposition rates. So this is a picture of our open compost pile. Cold composting systems, such as open piles or corrals, can tolerate less frequent turning. And we turn ours about every 2 weeks, but you can turn yours every 1 to 2 weeks if you wish. Cold piles do the job, they just do it more slowly than, say, an enclosed pile. So I wanted to share a few guidelines on composting. Don't place black walnut or buckeye leaves in your pile. They're actually poisonous, nor noxious weeds such as poison ivy or invasive plants. The black walnut contains a chemical that's toxic to some plants, and buckeye leaves contain toxins that are harmful to humans and animals. You shouldn't compost something like poison ivy because it contains the active oils which can survive the composting process, and the seeds and roots from composting can be spread by the compost that you use. Items such as corn cobs and husks, nutshells, large diameter woody branches, or trees with glossy leaves, you should limit those. Just consider, for example, like the broad evergreen leaves from a southern magnolia will take more time to break down than some other leaves. Don't place seeds in your pile or plants that have gone to seed in your pile. Viable seeds can survive the composting process and germinate when the finished compost is spread. So you may be creating new weeds in your garden. The bigger, the better it works. But just please consider making it a manageable size, say 3 foot by 3 foot, maybe 4 foot by 4 foot, something that you can manage. So let's talk a little bit about how you can use the compost that you've created. Once you compost, you can use it in your garden or landscape by incorporating it into planting soil or top dressing a planting bed or garden. In flower and garden beds, you can mix 3 to 4 inches of compost through the entire bed before planting. For established plants, top dress with several inches of compost. The compost will improve soil structure, loosen compacted clay soils that may have trouble draining, or help sandy soils. You'll reduce the need for fertilizer over time as well, and your plants will be healthier. Used as mulch, compost will help eliminate weeds and retain moisture. For established yards, you can enrich your lawn by taking an inch of compost and spreading it over your lawn in the fall. If you're trying to start a lawn, mix about 4 inches of compost into your soil before seeding the soil. Fallen leaves serve as an overwinter habitat for insects, birds, turtles, and frogs. In turn, these creatures help keep pests down and increase pollination in your garden. Leaves create a natural mulch that helps suppress weeds while fertilizing the soil as they break down, so they are perfect to use in perennial and garden beds. If you run out of time, simply turn the leaves into the soil of your vegetable garden. They'll decompose with time. And personally, we've done that in our vegetable garden. We've done that in the fall and then in the spring. By then, they've decomposed. It works. In summary, your yard plays an important role in the ecosystem all year round. In following some of these tips for thoughtful autumn cleanup, your garden will reap the rewards of abundant pollination, natural pest control, and food for visiting birds and wildlife next spring. So I'd like to give credit to the horticulturalists and professors whose works I cited throughout my presentation today. And finally, I would like to thank all of you all for attending today's presentation. And I'm happy to take questions at this time.
There have been a number of questions. First of all, do you have an opinion about shredding leaves? Some people are concerned about the quantity and they will use some kind of a shredder to reduce the amount of leaves that they would then spread in the garden.
Sure, that's a really good question. My preference is to leave the leaves as they are, whole. If you have the flexibility to select leaves that will decompose a little faster than others, do so. By shredding the leaves, if there are insects overwintering in those leaves, you can destroy them if they're overwintering in some capacity. So just something to think about as you move forward. Personally, we just keep our leaves whole.
Great, thank you. Can you
Mhm.
comment on the impact of sun exposure on a compost pile?
Sure, that's a great question also. Sun exposure, honestly, it would dry your pile out. I think you may find yourself having to add water more frequently. And if that's the case, you can add water, mix your pile. Personally, we use a pitchfork because it's easier on us than a shovel. But yeah, you may have to mix that moisture in to get it in. Again, the sun, it may dry out more quickly.
This was a comment with regard to the green component of compost. One participant actually prefers retaining grass clippings on the lawn to help replace artificial fertilizer rather than putting them in a compost pile. Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that would be just like putting extra nitrogen on your yard, and that could serve as a natural fertilizer. The one thing you'd want to be aware of is if there's clumps of grass clippings in one particular area of your yard or throughout your yard, it may kill the grass underneath. So, yeah, as long as it's spread somewhat evenly, that would be okay.
One participant noted some black bags in one of your earlier slides. I think it might have been the slide that showed the three-part compost pile. And she asked if those bags were used for storing almost ready compost before it was going to be used. If that, in fact, was the case, how long would the compost be stored in those bags?
I personally didn't take that photo. I know exactly which photo you're talking about. Most likely, those bags contain possibly leaves that this individual has collected from neighbors by the curb to add to their compost bin number one in that case. The finishing bin, that last bin three, is usually where the finished product is kept.
That participant also wanted to know if you can give a few more tips on how to know when the compost is actually ready to be used.
Depending on the type of pile that you have, whether it's an enclosed or more open, like the pile that we have, over time with regular turning, in our case, we turn it about every 2 weeks. You'll notice towards the end, it's going to continue to break down, break down, break down. There's all kinds of little bugs working in that compost pile, and it just decomposes over time. I hope that answers the question. It'll be a little bit finer material over time.
Okay, thank you. Another question, since milkweed plants have a chemical in their foliage that makes it unpleasant to some insects, should it be composted?
Actually, I'm not sure of the answer to that question. I would think that if there's a doubt that it's harmful to the insects that may be in that compost and eventually that compost will be spread, to maybe forego putting a milkweed plant into that compost to be composted. If the compost pile doesn't get up to a suitable temperature, it wouldn't be good for the insects further downstream that may be affected by that.
Someone just asked for a little clarification on what you mean by the expression top dressing.
Oh, that's a good question. Top dressing means putting a layer of compost across the top of, say, a garden bed that you're starting. You don't have to mix it in.
If you plant only native plants, shouldn't soil disruption and additives be kept to a minimum?
Yes, you are correct. If you have plants of any kind, soil disruption should be kept to a minimum. If you're setting up a garden bed and you're going to use compost in that, you can mix it in before your plants are planted. If you already have plantings, perennials coming up of different types, whether they're a bush or flowering species, just top dressing would be better because you don't want to disturb the roots.
Someone else asked for your thoughts on using fallen leaves that have landed on sidewalks or driveways.
On driveways, if I wasn't certain about things leaking from, say, a car that had been parked in that driveway or steel belted radials like the tire material, I'd probably steer away from using leaves from a driveway. Sidewalk, I would think that those would be okay to use. I think about salt that may be used in the winter time, but that will have been washed away from hopefully summer rains that we get or what have you, or just traffic and sweeping.
Next question. Do snakes and rodents hide and seek warmth in leaf compost bins? This particular participant has 13 large trees in the backyard, a mix of maples, oaks, magnolia, and dogwoods, which produce a lot of fallen leaves. And she is concerned about unwelcome visitors.
Depends on what kind of rodent. I don't think, like most rodents, like if it's a mouse or squirrel or something along those lines, they won't seek that kind of warmth. You shouldn't use any kind of food additives like chicken bones or fat drippings or something like that that may attract rodents to your compost pile. Just make sure you don't. Yeah, and moles and voles usually they stay underground, so I don't think you'll have too many problems with rodents. And as far as snakes go, like most snakes that I find during the winter time, they're seeking shelter under logs or rocks or heavy leaf layers, like in a more natural setting. I haven't seen any snakes in our compost pile, which is out in the open, not far from the woods.
With regard to the milkweed question, there is a comment. Milkweed is toxic to most insects except monarchs. This particular participant says she would not put it in the compost for the sake of both the composting process and future use in the garden. She also says the same thing, and you mentioned this about not using the black walnut leaves. They contain the component juglone, which is
Mhm.
allelopathic. It suppresses the growth of other plants. So that's the recommendation there. A comment, rodents might forage for insects in the compost and human food scraps. Claudia, thank you so much for sharing information today, both on the science behind the whole concept of leaving the leaves and providing the more practical information about how to actually go ahead and use them. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As I've mentioned, this will be our last presentation for 2025. So look for our class listings for the new year in December. Thank you again.